The fantasy football season is just days away and people are still drafting the wrong players. Your league mates are taking the players with the big flashy names, the guys who produced 1 to 2 years ago, and ignoring the players who actually have breakout upside. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you the 5 players you need to be drafting instead if you actually want to win your league. Now, I'm Sal Vetri. I've been helping people win their leagues for nearly 8 years, and I plan to do the same for you with this video. And I want to start it off by looking at the Bucs wide receiver room because this one is very interesting. Everybody right now, for the most part, a lot of people are still looking at this and saying Chris Godwin. There's a good majority of people that view Chris Godwin as still the Bucs wide receiver too. And I understand this is a guy who last year deserved this title. Until he got injured, he was arguably the best wide receiver in fantasy working with Baker Mayfield, mostly out of the slot in 3 wide receiver sets. But I want to take some time to look at the first round rookie here, Emeka Egbuka, right now, because he's basically going drafted right next to Chris Godwin in drafts, even though by all accounts, as of this recording, and probably by the time that this comes out and you're watching this, by the day, Emeka Egbuka is looking like a better and better fantasy pick. If you're not familiar, Egbuka went to Ohio State where he had multiple big seasons. Back in his sophomore year, he had over 1,100 yards despite tough competition, had a 26% target share, playing with other current NFL players. Last year in 2024, goes over 1,000 yards, has a strong 24% target share despite dealing with maybe the best receiver already in college football at Ohio State in Jeremiah Smith. This is a player in Emeka Egbuka, as you can see from Matt Harmon on reception perception in terms of how he wins. This is a guy who absolutely dominates zone coverage. 82nd percentile is very good. Then you can see his success rate in very limited snaps, 81st percentile, also very good. And Matt Harmon would also note this is a guy who watched all the film or a lot of the reps in certain games for Egbuka. Matt Harmon, he says strong set of hands as well. This is a player who worked out of the slot predominantly in college. He was dominant there in the zone type schemes, finding that spot in the zone. He was like a veteran wide receiver, just finding the soft spots of his own and then producing after the catch. He's also known as being just an extremely efficient player in terms of yards per route run. When he's actually out there, he earns targets from no matter who his quarterback is, and I expect that to translate into the NFL with Baker Mayfield, who's already gushing about this guy in training camp. And just to show you how good Emeka Egbuka is, wide receivers with 2 1,000 plus yard seasons at Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. In terms of career OSU record holders, you can see receiving yards there, receptions with 205. This is a guy who can definitely step into the NFL as a first round pick, mind you, and produce right away despite his competition. And as of right now, the competition is getting easier by the day, which might seem crazy, but reports are that Chris Godwin might not be playing week 1. There's a chance he goes on the PUP list and he's going to miss the first month of the season. As of right now in this recording, Jalen McMillan in the second week of preseason left the game with what is being called a serious neck strain, and we're not even sure if he's going to be ready week 1. If he gets put on the PUP list, maybe by the time that you're watching this, there's more news. Maybe it's more serious than we're already expecting of him potentially to miss a few games. Like, it's shaping up right now for Mike Evans on the outside and Emeka Egbuka on the outside in 2 wide receiver sets week 1. If you're not familiar, you probably already know, last year, week 7, Chris Godwin dislocated his ankle, a very serious injury, but it's not only that he had the dislocation in week 7, like this alone, he probably should have been coming back by week 1, but back in April, they kind of kept it under wraps. He had to go back in and have a second surgery on this. Now, it was a minor procedure. For the most part, these minor procedures can just be cleanups, and they really are minor. By all accounts, it seems like this one wasn't just a little cleanup because he has a chance of missing the first week to maybe 4 weeks of the season. The team went out there with this information of him having a second surgery and said, oh, we should probably draft a first round wide receiver, right? They had that information when the draft came at the end of April, early May. And that's when they decided to take Emeka Egbuka. So all the signs are pointing to the fact that they think Chris Godwin's injury is a little bit more serious. As you can see from Sports MD Analysis here on Twitter, be sure to follow me. He says, Chris Godwin, I lean towards him missing week 1. Drafting Emeka Egbuka suggests that Tampa Bay already knew the recovery would be delayed. That's exactly what we were just talking about here. I'm glad that I'm on the same page with Deepak, which makes me feel a little bit better, a little bit smarter as a sports MD Harvard surgeon, right? We love that. But regardless, we also like the fact that, look, Baker Mayfield loves this guy based on all the reports right now coming out of camp. Every time he talks about a player who's standing out, it's Emeka Egbuka. He says this guy's a polished veteran. He can basically do anything right now. We like that right now. And also, this is a guy in Baker Mayfield who saw his career get revived in Tampa Bay. Now, of course, that was with a different coach. We saw Liam Cohen last year really bring out the best of this passing attack, was a top 10 offense, was a top 10 passing attack. We saw a career year out of Baker Mayfield. I'm not sure if that's going to continue this year, but we don't need him to be another top 5 fantasy option for Emeka Egbuka, who where he currently goes in drafts as like a 7th, 8th, sometimes 9th round pick. He could still be a value for you, even if Baker Mayfield regresses a little bit from like a touchdown standpoint, right? If you look here, Baker's 41 touchdowns are obviously the standout in his career compared to his previous career highs of like 28 or the 25 range when he was a rookie and played in just limited games, right? So this is something that as of right now, first round pick, 2 wide receivers on his team who produced last year in Jalen McMillan and Chris Godwin. They are injured and their week 1 status is questionable. And his biggest competition is Mike Evans, who he is great, but he's also 32 years old. He's not a spry chicken. And just for reference, even with Liam Cohen gone, this is still a Bucs offense. If we scroll down to it here, Hayden Wink's tweet on Twitter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A top 10 offense in projected points is what the Bucs are expected to be this year. We'll see if that ends up panning out. But if I'm going to get a top 10 projected offense, they're going to pass the ball a lot, a talented wide receiver. Abuka, as of this recording, goes as the 102nd overall player. With the Jalen McMillan injury, and as we get more news on Chris Godwin, I expect him to start to skyrocket up into probably the 70s or 80s. But the fact that you can get him in your home league right now as probably an 8th round pick, maybe even later sometimes. And here's the thing. In home leagues right now, this is the biggest thing here, right? He's going 20 picks after Chris Godwin, who I don't even know if we see a healthy Chris Godwin until midseason in terms of him being 100% back to his actual health. And at that point, Emeka Abuka might just be taking over. So 20 picks later than Chris Godwin, I'd rather have Abuka ahead of Chris Godwin. Just a coin flip, not even factoring in the value. The fact you can get him 2 rounds later, oh yeah, we like that. And believe it or not, I'm also beginning to like Tony Pollard right now. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, this was a totally different stance. But of course, with the preseason and injuries occurring and a lot happening here, we have totally new information. So as of right now, Tony Pollard is going after Joe Mixon in drafts, which is crazy. We're going to get into why that's crazy. Joe Mixon, as I'm recording this, has no timeline to return. All of the whispers coming out about his ankle injury is that this could be something that's very serious, can put him on the PUP list, can maybe even linger longer. And as for Tony Pollard, he's one of only 2 running backs. Here's a little bar trivia for you. One of only 2 running backs the last 2 years to have 300 plus touches. The other running back was Derrick Henry. Now, last season, we know that the role was good, right? Tajay Spears was injured for most of the year, which allowed Tony Pollard's opportunity, his snap share and his opportunity share, the amount of carries and targets he saw in his backfield, to be top 10 in both of these areas. I mean, 73% is a very good number, especially for a guy like Tony Pollard. This helped him put up over 1,300 total yards in a Titans offense that basically had no passing attack. He was still able to go out there and produce 1,300 yards. He was still able to go out there and see, in an offense that did not get to the red zone often, 36 red zone touches. He was seeing more than 2 red zone touches a game. Again, the whole goal here is that with an improved quarterback, a new coach coming in terms of offensive coordinator and play calling here, offensive line improvements, is that they get to the red zone more often. And now the reason why Tony Pollard has gone from a guy that I said you can't be drafting this guy in round 6 or 7 of your drafts to now is a target in those rounds of the draft is because, well, Tajay Spears suffered a high ankle sprain in the first preseason game, an injury that takes 4 to 6 weeks to come back from. He suffered it about 4 weeks before the season started, and these high ankle sprains, they just linger, especially at the running back position. Normally, guys will come back too soon, especially if you're trying to hit a week 1 deadline like a Tajay Spears will. We've seen this in past years. A couple of years back, Austin Eckler had a high ankle sprain week 1, basically affected his whole season. These running backs, when they get a high ankle sprain or a mild hamstring strain, or actually I would say a more mild, a grade 2 hamstring strain that keeps you out 4 to 6 weeks, they usually linger and you don't see that same player for maybe 8+ weeks. So that's not good for Tajay Spears, who was once a target for us where he would go in like the 9th or 10th round of fantasy drafts. But at this point, we can't be targeting him, at least I'm personally going to not be targeting him due to injury. If we look at the 5 games last year without Tajay Spears, keep in mind this was a bad offense for Tony Pollard. Look at where his numbers went to. Between his receiving yards of 13 and his rushing yards of 93, he was averaging over 100 total yards per game compared to the 11 games with Tajay Spears. It was only 70 yards per game. So you're seeing like a more than 50% increase in production last year when Tajay Spears was off the field. And again, that was in a bad offense that we're hoping is improved this year. Just for more updates on Tajay Spears, you can see Sports MD Analysis, a Harvard-trained surgeon over on Twitter, a sports surgeon. He says Tajay Spears averages 3 to 4 weeks, but ramp up is about 4 to 6 weeks before the volume and stats start to come back along. So that's exactly what we were talking about. He suffered this injury 4 weeks before the season starts. I don't think we're going to see that healthy Tajay Spears until probably at best week 3 or week 4 of the NFL season, which at that point, I just really don't want to take any risks on it. At best, if there's no setbacks, if he doesn't come back too soon and re-injure it like he did at times last year, that's at best you're going to have to miss a couple of weeks of the season or at least not be 100%. I'm going to be avoiding that, which only helps Tony Pollard get going early in the offense and maybe get it in an even bigger role. And for what it's worth right here, again, this was just a very small preseason usage, but Jacob Gibbs points out on Twitter, Tony Pollard was dominating the playing time in that first preseason game before Tajay Spears' injury, according to Fantasy Life and Dwayne McFarland's utilization. If you can see it right here, Tony Pollard was seeing 79% of the snaps compared to 21% for Pollard, 67% of the carries, and 75% of the routes. Again, this was a very small sample. We're talking about 1 to 2 drives in the preseason with the starters before Tajay Spears got hurt. But in those 1 to 2 drives, a dress rehearsal, if you will, Tony Pollard was the clear-cut starter ahead of Tajay Spears. Would that have changed in the second game? The third game, we won't know because Tajay got hurt. Now, I've been referencing some of these offseason moves with the Tennessee Titans. The obvious one is they got their first-round quarterback in Cam Ward. They added some wide receivers and tight ends in the draft, but the offensive line is the other big one. You go out and you get Kevin Zeitler, a guard from the Detroit Lions, a top 10 player at his position last year. He's a little bit older, but still a top 10 player at the position. The big addition that they do is get Dan Moore. This is a guy who's battling injuries right now. Hopefully he could be ready for week 1. But the goal is that this is an improved offensive line, the quarterback number 1 overall pick, like the least talked about number 1 overall pick in quite some time at the quarterback position. If he's just better than what you had last year, which I think he's going to be, pretty bad play from Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, the whole offense should be an upgrade. Now let's compare that to Joe Mixon, who people I can't believe this at this point. They're taking Joe Mixon ahead of Tony Pollard, given all the information that we currently know about this situation. It's not a pretty situation. If we pull this up right here from SportsMD Analysis on Twitter, Joe Mixon not having healed from an off-season ankle injury. An off-season ankle injury he's still not healed from by now suggests that it's very high severity versus a re-injury, very high concern. So not only is there very high severity for the current injury, potentially keeping him out for the beginning of the season, maybe goes on PUP and misses 4 games. But even when he comes back, and honestly, maybe if he comes back, he probably will. He might have news by the time you're watching this. But when he comes back, the re-injury risk could also be very high for Joe Mixon, an aging running back. So that's already a concern. And another concern is that this was like arguably the worst offensive line in the NFL last year. And what did they do this year to help it? Okay, they drafted a second-round tackle. But outside of that, it only got worse. They lost Laramie Tunsil. They traded him to the Washington Commanders. Like the one piece on this offensive line that was actually good, he's gone. They lost Kendrick Green and Kenyon Green. I don't think they're actually going to miss those players, but like you're just turning a bad offensive line to even worse. You get Cam Robinson at left tackle to replace Laramie Tunsil, at least in terms of the tackle position, and then Trenton Brown, whatever he has left. Overall, this offensive line is still going to be a bottom 5 unit for a banged up Joe Mixon that we don't know about. How can you possibly be taking him ahead of Tony Pollard? Mixon's situation is trending down while Pollard's these last few weeks is trending up, yet Mixon still goes in drafts at the same, if not one pick before on average, according to the current ADP as of this recording. I think right now you want to be taking Tony Pollard there easily. Now, if you want to be seeing where I have all these players ranked in my top 50 overall rankings completely free, you can check it out right now, link down below, or you can head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That will take you to this page where you just enter your email and I will send you instantly, or maybe a couple minutes later, the top 50 overall rankings. Be sure to check your spam and promotional folders. That will include my top 50 rankings tiered, and it will highlight in green and red the best and worst picks you could be making. But I know your fantasy drafts are soon. You might have already had one, or there's one tonight or coming up in a few days. So if you're a serious player and you want my full top 250 overall rankings, all my other drafting tools, my in-season tools, all that, you can get it in the Fantasy Blueprint. That's why I built it. It's what I use in all my leagues, and over 10,000 people are currently using in their leagues. If you want to learn more about that, it's linked down below right now. You can check it out. It'll take you to this page, or you can just type in jointheblueprint.com. That is jointheblueprint.com to learn more. You can read the testimonials that are on this page as well from a bunch of testimonials. There's over 10,000 people that used the product last year. Over 85% of those people who signed up last year are now back this year as well, which I think just goes to show you that this is a good product. 9 out of 10 people said, I had it last year and it worked. It was good. I'm back again. So if you want to schmack around your league mates this year and have them wondering, how did this guy get so good at fantasy like overnight? Well, you can check out jointheblueprint.com and get your blueprint now. The next player we got to talk about is Xavier Worthy, because this guy's being extremely disrespected based on the current news going on his team right now. This is a player that you want to be taking, especially compared to a guy like DK Metcalf. We love DK Metcalf. We've loved him in past years. He's a size speed specimen. But if you're taking DK Metcalf over Xavier Worthy, you're crazy. But your league mates are doing that right now. Most people are taking Metcalf over Worthy. Here's why that's a mistake. Okay, if you look at Worthy's stats last year as a rookie, I mean, not terrible for a rookie. Back in the day, if you did this as a rookie, that's a good starting point. Now it's like, oh, you underachieved. 638 yards, 59 receptions. He did this on 98 targets. But here's the big thing. Later on in the season, when he finally got his legs under him, when there was no Rashee Rice, obviously for most of the year, when they leaned on Xavier Worthy more from week 15 on into the postseason, he produced. Because in those final 4 games of the regular season, Worthy went from averaging just 9.5 fantasy points per game to 15.8. He went from just 5 targets per game to earning more of Patrick Mahomes' trust and averaging over 7.7 targets per game, according to RotoViz's game splits tools. But then the playoffs came, and he just took this end of season production and went nuclear in the postseason. Because in the most important games of the year, in the AFC Championship game against the Buffalo Bills, 6 catches on 7 targets, 85 yards and a touchdown. In the Super Bowl, a game where they lost, obviously a lot of this was garbage time, or at least the final touchdown was, 8 receptions on 8 targets, 157 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, we know that there was a late garbage time touchdown in that one, but this was a guy who over those final 3 games in the postseason had 21 targets, caught 19 of them, and was the clear number 1 option ahead of Travis Kelce, ahead of Marquise Brown, who returned from an injury, for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And here's a pretty interesting chart from Jared Smola on Twitter. He compares the final 8 games of Rashee Rice's rookie year a couple years back to Xavier Worthy last year, because everybody loved Rashee Rice heading into year 2. Now look at how similar they were. Targets, Rice had 5 more. Target share, basically the same. Receptions and yardage, basically the same. PPR points, Xavier Worthy had more because he was scoring more touchdowns. same yards per route run, same basically PFF grades. These guys, they did it in different ways, but the second half of the season, when Xavier Worthy was playing that Rashee Rice role, he was producing just like him. And it probably matters because you had Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, great coach, great quarterback, same system, you produce. Now, this is important for this year because a couple of reasons. First off, Travis Kelce's another year older, right? So there's that. Rashee Rice is going to be ready for the beginning of the year, although he's battled like a groin injury in camp, but he's expected to be ready for the beginning of the year. But then he's likely going to face a suspension, and the suspension is going to come at midseason. And the NFL wanted double-digit games. We'll call it 10 games for Rashee Rice based on his incident. I don't think they're walking away with less than 6 games. My guess is that Rashee Rice, bare minimum, is going to be suspended 4 games. Odds are he's getting 6 to 8 games. So if you're going to tell me that for the first 4 weeks of the season, Xavier Worthy has to compete with Rashee Rice, and then maybe for the next 8 weeks of the season, 6 to 8 weeks of the season, it's just going to be his wide receiver room. Like, sure, Marquise Brown is there. Marquise Brown just recently returned from an ankle injury in camp, and he missed the first 2 to 3 weeks of camp. He missed all of last camp because he got hurt in the first like 1 or 2 plays of preseason. So this is a guy who I would say is not yet like all caught up in this offense. Came back week 15, 16, was limited last year heading into the postseason. If this is your biggest competition in an aging Travis Kelce, you have to feel really good about second-year player, extremely fast wide receiver Xavier Worthy, who's starting to earn the trust of his quarterback and Patrick Mahomes last year. He profiles out Xavier Worthy as a Tyreek Hill type. Not the same type of player at all. Different size bodies, I would say, as well, but speed and where they actually can win downfield after the catch. Now let's compare that to DK Metcalf, who I like this guy. There's a lot of reasons to like him, right? He's 6'3", 228 pounds, and runs like in the 4.3s. He's an absolute freak. But this is a guy who is now a part of the Steelers and their run-heavy attack. In fact, over the last 3 seasons, Pittsburgh has ranked bottom 10 in passing yards and bottom 5 in pass attempts. Look, this is an offense that in the NFL draft, with their first pick that they could spend on the offensive position, they went with Caleb Johnson in the 3rd round, right? So they ended up taking a 3rd round running back in Caleb Johnson. They're probably going to want to run the ball a ton. That's what Arthur Smith has done at every stop of his career, including last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where Najee Harris saw 300 touches, right? They added Aaron Rodgers, as you can see right here. They added him this offseason. They added Jonnu Smith, who can help in the blocking game as well. But adding Aaron Rodgers, a 42-year-old, non-mobile quarterback, that doesn't really feel great in terms of extending drives like he once could. I mean, this is a guy in Aaron Rodgers who targeted Garrett Wilson 153 times last year, and Garrett Wilson only finished as like the wide receiver 18 in fantasy, like even though he had 153 targets. So there's a world where like DK Metcalf, unless he has like a 15 touchdown season, which you can say for any wide receiver, there's a world where like his ceiling is the wide receiver 15, but his floor is like the wide receiver 35 to 40. Like, you're just paying for not much of a ceiling here. In fact, DK Metcalf, when he was on past offenses like Seattle, who were throwing the ball a ton more, especially last year, only the wide receiver 30, wide receiver 22 before that, wide receiver 24. I mean, this is a guy who has not finished as a top 20 wide receiver basically since 2020 when he was just entering the league, despite being one of the biggest big play consistent guys in the NFL, or at least that's what people think of him, a big play guy. It hasn't been that the last couple of years. He does it here or there, and then he's not doing it consistently for a week in and week out basis, and then he ends up getting banged up. That's kind of been the DK Metcalf story. Despite him being the number 1 target on his team, I would much rather have Xavier Worthy right now, who goes as the 57th overall player in drafts, which is about 10 picks after DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf in some drafts, including your own, is going to go around before Xavier Worthy, and that's a complete mistake. Do not forget the fact that Rashee Rice is probably missing bare minimum 4 games, likely 6 to 8 this year. That matters. And before we get into this next situation, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds of your time, and it goes a long way as we head towards 200,000 subscribers. It's a goal of mine, so I appreciate you all a ton. Now, the next situation I want to look at has to do with Ricky Pearsall, who honestly, by all accounts, looks like he's going to be the 49ers, or should be, wide receiver 1 to start the season. This is a potential breakout player that, if you're in the fantasy circles, if you watch YouTube videos, you listen to podcasts, you probably know about, but your league mates definitely do not view Ricky Pearsall the same way that they should be. Because as of right now, and this is hilarious, people are taking, on average, over 80% of the time, Jerry Jeudy attached to the Cleveland Browns offense ahead of Ricky Pearsall attached to Kyle Shanahan's offense. Crazy. Let's not forget, this is a former first-round pick who's an athletic freak. A 4.41 40 times what he ran. Look at this in terms of player profiler, athletic testing. Burst score, 98th percentile. Agility, 97th percentile. Catch radius, 99th percentile. One of the best athletes we've ever seen attend the combine. One of the most efficient wide receivers to come out of the draft from Florida in these past 5 years. And this is a guy who had a lot of upside, but he was blocked last year because of Brandon Ayuk being there, because of Deebo Samuel being there, because of his own injury in training camp and then getting shot. But now everything's starting to come together. No Deebo, a banged up Brandon Brandon Ayuk and a guy who has a clear path to week 1 playing time, and he ended last year pretty good. You can see how he ended last year right here. In week 17, 28.7 fantasy points, 141 receiving yards, crazy. And week 18, 18.9 fantasy points, has 69 receiving yards and a touchdown. He was dominating downfield. He looked extremely efficient, averaging over 100 receiving yards per game these final 2 weeks. And so far in the preseason, as of this recording, through these first 2 preseason games or so, this has been a guy who has looked very good when he's been out there with Brock Purdy in the first team offense. So much so, as you can see my tweet right here, in week 2 of the preseason, which is normally like a dress rehearsal for these teams these days, they'll play their starters a little bit more. Pearsall played 82% of the first team snaps. You love to see that. He turned these 82% of the snaps into 3 catches for 42 yards on 4 targets. The dude only ran 7 routes in this game. Just 7 routes run, and he had 4 targets from Brock Purdy. And basically anywhere you look right now, Kyle Shanahan's hyping up Pearsall, finally that he's got him back out there. Brock Purdy's hyping up Pearsall. Like, everybody is saying good things. The beat reporters, there's a drum beat here for Ricky Pearsall. Now, the reason why this is so important is because of what's going on right now with Brandon Ayuk. The latest news that we got about this was Kyle Shanahan basically saying, like, anybody coming back from an ACL, which includes Brandon Ayuk for this team, is probably not going to be seen until around like week 6 for the team. Okay, so Brandon Ayuk, soft return date for week 6. That's not great for Ayuk, but it is good for Ricky Pearsall and the 49ers, who, as you can see from Ryan Heath's tweet here, that he says Brock Purdy draws the 3rd easiest quarterback schedule this year. This is one of the easiest schedules in football across all positions, running backs, wide receivers as well. So you're going to tell me that there's not going to be Brandon Ayuk for maybe the first 1 to 2 months of the season, or at least not 100% healthy Ayuk till probably like November or midseason, in an offense that is currently projected for the 3rd most points per game, 25.1, basically a virtual tie with the Ravens and Bills for the most points per game this season, and the #1 wide receiver in this Kyle Shanahan efficient offense. Week 1 could easily be Ricky Pearsall, because his current other competition is going to be Juwan Jennings, who's dealing with his own calf injury that apparently is a real calf injury, not a contract holdout, so that doesn't feel great for Juwan Jennings. Pearsall wheels up. Compared to Jerry Jeudy right now, which this is pretty crazy, compared to Jerry Jeudy, who is currently going so much before. Let's actually just pull it up right now. Look at this right now. Ricky Pearsall goes as the 94th overall player. That'll probably be rising soon, is my guess by the time that you're watching this, but we got to scroll really far. 15 to 20 picks higher is where Jerry Jeudy goes. Despite Jerry Jeudy, if you look at his games last year without Jameis Winston as his quarterback, Jeudy was the wide receiver 70 in fantasy points per game. No production at all without Jameis. In fact, Jeudy averaged fewer than 10 points in 8 of his 10 non-Jameis starts. And he only had 1 top 20 finish all season long when Jameis wasn't his quarterback. So just don't make this mistake. Wait a round later. Heck, if you even wanted to reach for a round on Ricky Pearsall, because he's probably going to be rising in drafts over these next couple of days, well then go ahead and do so. I think Ricky Pearsall is like a 7th, 8th, or 9th round pick is a steal right now. And you might be saying, Sal, aren't you the same guy who like 2 months ago said that Ricky Pearsall was off your board? Well, maybe I didn't say off my board, but a lot has changed in 2 months. Brandon Ayuk, who was expected to return week 1, is no longer returning week 1. Juwan Jennings, who wasn't hurt 2 months ago, is now hurt with a calf injury. Ricky Pearsall, who was dealing with a hamstring injury in OTAs and minicamp, now does not have that hamstring injury, right? A lot has changed. You have to shift your opinions when you get 2 more months of information, of course. So these are the reasons why I like Ricky Pearsall. And I actually really like him right now to go for more than his receiving yard total this year, because he has the role, the potential usage, and definitely the efficiency in this offense that's expected to score a lot of points to have a ton of yards. And since we're talking about making picks, I'm teaming up with DraftKings Pick 6 this year for week 1 to give you a shot at their biggest bag ever. Right now, all DraftKings Pick 6 customers can play for free for a shot at a cut of $1 million or more. Pick more or less on 6 player stats, share it with your crew, because the more people that play, the bigger the bag grows, and if you hit all 6, you are in for a share of over $1 million. So if you want to play along, download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, sign up using my promo code SAL, and claim your free token today. Simply put, let's build this bag together. And the next player I want to talk about is Josh Downs, who, as of this recording, is dealing with a bit of a hamstring injury. They're not calling it major. He's expected to play week 1. Hopefully that holds up. But this is one of the most underrated players in all of football, not just fantasy football, all of football. He ranked 6th in the NFL last year, despite having multiple quarterbacks, having a 30% target rate. Now, what is a target rate? It means when you run a route, how often you were targeted when you actually run a route. This dude was 6th in the NFL. Almost 1 out of 3 times if he ran a route, he was getting targeted by either Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco. Didn't matter who the quarterback was. Okay, now that's pretty good. Now, if you do look at it, Josh Downs has dealt with injuries in the past. He missed 3 games with an injury last year, but despite that, despite missing 3 games with an injury, having Anthony Richardson, who was historically the least accurate quarterback in NFL history last year for stretches of times, this dude still had 72 catches for 803 yards, which is pretty impressive when you factor in the injury and you factor in the pretty terrible quarterback play. And when you look at some of his advanced metrics, I mean, outside of just the target rate stat we already talked about, this dude's elite. We'll pull up Matt Harmon again from Reception Perception because this guy is the best of the best when it comes to wide receivers and watching their film. He said that last year, 90th percentile against man coverage is what Josh Downs did. Elite for a guy that many people believe is just a slot zone receiver only, but in the zone as well, 92nd percentile against beating zone, press coverage 82nd percentile. Anything in the 80th percentile is great. 90th percentile is elite. This dude was elite against both man and zone coverage last year. The dude knows how to get open, was an absolute steal for the Colts a couple of years ago in the 3rd round of the draft, and if he can stay healthy this year, despite who his quarterback ends up being, he's going to be a value where he currently goes in drafts. Now, the big thing is if he can stay healthy. Let's get back from this hamstring as soon as possible, Josh Downs. And the quarterback play this year, I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be pretty ass, but that's kind of already factored into what we're talking about here, right? I mean, look, last year when Joe Flacco was the quarterback, Josh Downs for those games with Joe Flacco basically looked like a star. So if we can just get bottom 10 play, which is what Joe Flacco provided last year in his games, out of Daniel Jones, who has been named the starter for week 1, and the coach does say, Shane Steichen, they're not going to have a short leash, so let's just say he starts the first half of the year or so. Just Joe Flacco level production, bottom 10 quarterback play, we could be in a good spot because in 7 games with Joe Flacco, Downs averaged 15.5 fantasy points. He was a top 20 wide receiver. In those games, he was averaging over 9 targets per game and nearly 7 receptions per game. I mean, that is strong production. And if there's one thing we know about Daniel Jones, is this is a guy who likes to live in those short areas of the field. Heck, he targeted Wan'Dale Robinson like 140 times last year. In past years, he's loved throwing the ball to guys like Sterling Shepard out of the slot. So look, we know Josh Downs is more than just a slot receiver, but he was top 5 in separation score out of the slot last year. That was up there with guys like Jamar Chase as a slot receiver when he moved into the slot, Ladd McConkey, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Again, this is an elite wide receiver, Josh Downs out of the slot, now paired with Daniel Jones, who loves throwing to the slot. But here's the craziest part. Josh Downs is currently going after Cooper Kupp in fantasy drafts, well after Cooper Kupp in fantasy drafts. Despite Cooper Kupp, I mean, look, this is a guy who has not played more than 12 games in 4 years. Last year, he missed 5 games. Year before that, he missed 5 games. Year before that, he missed 8 games. This is a guy who just can't stay healthy. And even when he was on the field last year to end the season, this dude was cooked. In your most important times of the season, your fantasy playoffs, from weeks 13 to 17, Cooper Kupp, here's what he ranked: 78th in wide receiver points. He averages less than 7 points per game from those final 5 weeks last year when you needed him most. Less than 7 points a game. And now he's changing teams, right? So he's going to a new offense. That's not great. He's not with Sean McVay anymore, Matthew Stafford. He's going to a team that has a brand new offensive coordinator, has Sam Darnold, a new quarterback on this team, has JSN, who's going to be the #1 option. So everything for Cooper Kupp is trending down. And look, it's accounted for in his ADP. It's not like he's going as a 2nd or a 3rd round fantasy option anymore. Cooper Kupp now goes in those later rounds, like rounds 7 through 8, but Josh Downs is going way later than that. Look at this right now. Oh, let's pull it up right here. Josh Downs goes as the 115th overall player in fantasy drafts. Make this make sense. He's going as like a 10th or an 11th round pick. Meanwhile, let's scroll up to Cooper Kupp right now because he's going well before this in fantasy drafts. Cooper Kupp going as the 92nd overall pick. 2 rounds before Josh Downs is crazy to me. Cooper Kupp is not going to produce after the catch this year. He's not going to get separation on the outside. He's going to have to be a slot target who sees a lot of volume from Sam Darnold, which doesn't feel good when you're not even the #1 option on your team. Don't overthink this one. Take the guy who is 8 years younger. Yes, 8 years younger, which is crazy. The 24-year-old Josh Downs, who is quietly an elite wide receiver, and if this guy can just get healthy for week 1, I feel great about him in the later rounds. So there you go. Most people are drafting the wrong players, so take the 5 that we just mentioned in this video instead if you actually want to win your leagues this year. But if you want to see the 10 picks that I consider the best picks in all of fantasy this year, in the entire fantasy draft, in every round, we're talking about the best picks, the highest upside, the best value, we'll check out this video right here. When you put it all together, these are the 10 best picks you need to be targeting in fantasy football.